Okay, we are back. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, official map amendment application 2018I-00142, rezoning of 1290 William Street from GMU 20 with a UO3 overlay to PUD-G 23. This is a rescheduled public hearing to approve with condition, to recommend to City Council approval with conditions or denial of this map amendment. This is an official public hearing of the Denver Planning Board. We have a number of people signed up to speak. Staff, can you let us know how many people are signed up tonight?
Joel, we currently have 29 folks signed up to speak.
Okay. So
Chairman?
Yes, sir. Don.
I just want to I wanted to disclose that I have numerous connections with this property. My firm has rented space in it a couple of times, and my wife and I have rented space in it a couple of times. I have exposure to it in the very distant past, a quarter century ago. I actually was involved in the prior owner of the property, not CHUN and not with any of the applicant's team. And I also have exposure both as a user of the facility and a user of the park. So I have lots of connections to this property, but I do think I can make an objective judgment about this application. I will not be recusing myself.
Thank you. I do think it's just as important to disclose those things so people know them, even if they aren't conflicts of interest. Because later if somebody said, well, didn't he rent space years ago, or whatever the thing may be, we all know that you're taking that into account and can still be objective. Thank you. Our staff report today will be from Scott Robinson.
Yes, thank you. Scott Robinson with Community Planning and Development. As you said, this is a request to rezone 1290 William Street from GMU 20 UO3 to PUD-G number 23. The property is located in Council District 10 in the Cheeseman Park neighborhood. It is on the north side of Cheeseman Park at the southeast corner of William Street and 13th Avenue. The property is approximately 17,000 square feet. As I said, it's currently zoned GMU 20 UO3, which is general urban context multi-unit residential with a 20-story maximum height. And the UO3 is the historic structure use overlay. And the request is to go to PUD-G number 23, which is a custom zoning, and I'll get into a little more of what that means in a minute. And the applicants are requesting the rezoning to allow for construction of the new annex building and allow for more uses on the property. The property is also known as the Tears-McFarland House. It is an individual Denver landmark, landmarked in 1972. The house itself was built in 1899. You can see in this photo the house in the center of the property, and then in the bottom right, the southeast corner of the property is what's known as the annex building. It was built around 1980. It is not itself landmarked, although the entire property is part of the landmark site. So changes to the annex building or demolition or reconstruction of it would require landmark approval for that. As I said, the existing zoning is GMU 20 UO3. The same zoning is immediately to the west. To the east is PUD zoning. To the north, GMU 3-story zoning. And then the south is OSA, open space zoning for the park. Current use of the property is office. And you can see it's surrounded by residential, multi-unit residential to the east and west. Single unit residential to the north, although this neighborhood has a good mix of single unit and multi-unit residential with some commercial and civic uses mixed in. You can see the commercial uses along and mixed use along Colfax, 2 blocks to the north, and then the park again immediately to the south. Here you can see the subject property in the bottom center photo, and then some of the surrounding properties. So the proposed PUD zone district is, as I said, custom zoning. It is based on the GMU3 zone district. So it starts with that as its base and then modifies it in a few ways. It would allow construction in the urban house building form. The PUD divides the property into 2 sub areas, which have different standards. It would still be one property, one zone lot, but different zoning standards within the 2 sub areas. Sub area A is the larger portion where the existing house sits, it would allow a maximum of 3 stories and 45 feet, 50% lot coverage, and the standard GMU3 setbacks. Sub-area B is where the existing annex building sits today and where the proposed new annex building would be. It allows a maximum of 1 story and 20 feet in height, 3,500 square feet of maximum building coverage, and 1 foot setbacks on the side and rear to accommodate development in that narrow location. And the PUD requires maintaining the existing 9 parking spaces on the property. As for uses, the property starts with the allowed uses of the GMU3 U03, which is residential uses, and then the additional uses allowed in the historic structure use overlay, which is bed and breakfast uses, non-medical offices, and art studios. And then in addition to those uses, additional uses are added in the PUD, most notably retail uses and eating and drinking establishments, which is to say restaurants. That's a high-level overview of the PUD. There's more specifics. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that if you have any. As for a process, as was noted at the beginning, this was initially postponed or initially scheduled for the July 27th, 2020 Planning Board hearing, but was postponed to this date at that meeting, tentatively scheduled for September 15th, Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee, and then City Council hearing tentatively scheduled for October 26th. We've received quite a bit of public comment on this application. You have in your packet 2 letters from registered neighborhood organizations in the area supporting it, 124 letters of support from individuals, and 132 letters of opposition. The letters of support generally support the idea to preserve the structure and allow broader uses to serve the community. Letters of opposition are generally opposed to the impacts on the neighborhood and concerned that the allowed uses would not be appropriate in this location adjacent to the park. In order to approve a rezoning, the city must find that these 5 criteria have been met. The first criterion is consistency with adopted plans. There are currently 3 plans that apply to this property. That's Comprehensive Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver, and the Capitol Hill Cheeseman Park Neighborhood Plan from 1993. However, as we just had at the previous hearing, the city is in the process of adopting the East Central Area Plan. And as noted, that is tentatively scheduled for City Council adoption on October 5th, which would be before this application's City Council public hearing of October 26th. So even though that plan has not been adopted yet, it, if things stay on schedule, would be adopted before this application comes to City Council. So we think it's important to evaluate the proposal against both plans. So I'll speak to both the existing Capitol Hill Cheeseman Park Neighborhood Plan and the future East Central Area Plan. So first, the Comprehensive Plan 2040, as described in the staff report, staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with multiple strategies from Comp Plan 2040 relating to providing infill development and supporting historic preservation and a broad range of businesses. In terms of equity, staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with this strategy from the equitable, affordable, and inclusive vision element relating to providing a broader range of amenities and services in neighborhoods for residents. And in terms of climate change, staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with these 2 strategies from the environmentally resilient vision element relating to infill development and mixed-use communities. The second plan is Blueprint Denver. The future context designation for this property is general urban, which is consistent with the GMU3 base zoning for the proposed PUD. General urban calls for integrating a wide variety of building forms and uses into neighborhoods. Multi-unit residential is the most common, but commercial and mixed use are embedded throughout, and commercial uses occur in a variety of building forms, such as old houses like this. The future place designation is high residential, which calls for predominantly multi-unit residential, but commercial uses should be interspersed throughout, so a wide variety of commercial uses. And building heights are generally the tallest residential places in this context. However, at this location, because of the historic landmark, greater heights are not appropriate for this property. So that's consistent with the 3-story maximum height in the proposed PUD. 13th Avenue is a residential arterial street, which calls for more throughput and also primarily residential uses, but again, other uses are appropriate, including small retail nodes, consistent with the proposed zone district. Growth area strategies. This area falls under all other areas of the city, intended to accommodate 10% of new jobs and 20% of new housing over the next 20 years. And then Blueprint Denver also includes a number of strategies and other recommendations, including recommendations around historic preservation, as listed here, which would be consistent with the proposed PUD and its intent to preserve the landmarked Tears-McFarland house. Blueprint also includes recommendations about custom zoning, saying that generally custom zoning such as PUDs should be avoided and should only be used where there's not a standard zone district that would implement the city's plans. And in this location, again, because of the landmark structure in the center of the property, there's not a standard zone district that would fit this property while promoting the city's plans, or being consistent with the city's plans for promote preservation and reuse of structures. So staff finds that a custom zoning approach is appropriate here, and the proposed rezoning is consistent with Blueprint Denver. Next is the Capitol Hill Cheeseman Park neighborhood plan, which again is the existing neighborhood plan from 1993 that would be replaced by the East Central Area Plan if it is adopted as scheduled on October 5th. This plan, the Capitol Hill Cheeseman Park plan, includes this property in the Cheeseman North District, which is generally a medium density residential area that prioritizes historic character. The plan recommends allowing commercial uses where they have already existed. As I mentioned earlier, this property is currently used as an office, also encouraging a variety of businesses and historic preservation, both of which are consistent with the proposed PUD. And then getting to the East Central Area Plan, which again is not currently adopted, but if things stay on schedule, would be the adopted small area plan for this property at the October 26th City Council hearing. The future context and place designation in the East Central Area Plan are the same as Blueprint, general urban context, high residential place. And those descriptions and definitions are consistent with Blueprint as well as described earlier. The East Central Area Plan also recommends encouraging renovations and additions instead of demolition of structures in residential areas, which is again consistent with the PUD, which would promote the preservation and reuse of the existing structure. Also calls for adaptive reuse and encouraging that by allowing a broader range of uses and appropriate additions on historic structures, which is what the PUD would allow more commercial uses to make reuse of the structure more viable and allow for appropriate construction in the back of the building. And that also calls for preserving existing structures that contribute to neighborhood character such as this. So staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with the East Central Area Plan draft and the first criterion met. The second criterion is uniformity of district regulations. Staff finds the proposed rezoning would result in the uniform application of the custom zoning within its zone district location. And the third criterion is to further the public health, safety, and general welfare of the city. Staff finds the proposed rezoning would do so by implementing the city's adopted plans and promoting the historic preservation of the existing structure. The fourth criterion is justifying circumstances. Staff finds the proposed rezoning justified by changed and changing conditions in the area. There has been some development in the area, in the neighborhood surrounding it, increasing density, increasing the demand for retail services and restaurant services. And then there have also been changes on the property that with the landmarking of and the regulations that apply to that in the existing zoning, reuse and reconstruction of the aging annex building aren't possible under the existing zoning, and a rezoning is necessary to facilitate that adaptive reuse of the structure and reinvestment for the continued long-term prosperity of the landmark structure. Then the fifth criterion is consistency with neighborhood context, zone district purpose and intent. Staff finds the proposed zoning would be consistent with the general urban context, which is the basis for the proposed PUD. And then the PUD would meet the purpose and intent statements for land unit development custom zoning, which I'll get to in just a second. So those are the standard review criteria. There are, as I just said, additional review criteria for land unit development districts that I'll go over now. The first is that the PUD district is consistent with the intent and purpose of such districts stated in the Denver zoning code. Staff finds that the proposed PUD is consistent with those that purpose and intent. A customized zoning approach is necessary to accommodate the landmark structure and protect it and preserve it while allowing use of the property. Accommodating that under standard zone district would require several variances or waivers. So there's not a standard zone district that would fit. This also promotes diversification in the use of land by allowing for a broader range of uses while maintaining a development pattern compatible in character and design with the surrounding neighborhood, again, by preserving the existing structure and then allowing low-scale development on other parts of the property. The second PUD review criterion is that the PUD district complies with the technical standards and criteria in Division 9.6, which staff has found that it does. The third criterion is the development proposed on the subject property is not feasible under standard zone district and require an unreasonable number of variances and waivers, which, as I just described, it is the case. The fourth criterion, the PUD district and would establish permitted uses that are compatible with the existing land uses of the adjacent subject property. As described, the neighborhood has a mix of residential and commercial uses, which is the intent of the general urban context and the high residential place. So staff finds that criterion met. And then the fifth criterion is that the PUD establishes building forms that are compatible with adjacent existing building forms, which staff has found it does by promoting the urban house building form with modifications to make it fit on the property and appropriate for its location. So that staff finds that all criteria are met and recommends approval. I'll be happy to answer questions, and I believe the applicant has a presentation they would like to give.
Okay, let's turn to the applicant presentation. Who is the applicant? We need to give them permission to present here.
I believe it's Bruce O'Donnell will be the presenter for the applicant.
Yep. We'll do that here. He is on 3 different times, so I'm going to try to turn on all of them. All right, Bruce, you should have control now to speak. And then Scott, will you be queuing through his presentation for him?
Yes.
Great. And I will be putting on the timer for 6 minutes.
I think perhaps you gave permission to the wrong Bruce. This is Bruce Boyd.
Thank you.
Okay, Bruce O'Donnell, can you talk?
I can talk, yes.
Oh,
Can you
fantastic.
hear me?
Yes, if you'd introduce yourself for the record, and you'll have 6 minutes.
Thank you, members of the planning board. My name is Bruce O'Donnell. I reside at 386 Emerson Street in Denver, and I'm the owner's representative for this rezoning application. And first off, I want to thank you for the kind words for Susan Stanton. I join you in the sadness of loss of a great friend. So I will try to coordinate with Scott on flipping through these slides. Obviously, we're looking at 1290 Williams on the north edge of Cheeseman Park. And it is owned by CHUN, Capitol Hill United Neighbors. RNO is the owner of the property. and they are joined by City Street investors who will also be speaking to you later this evening about the plans for the reuse of the property after the rezoning. Go ahead, Scott, please. Thank you. The goal of this rezoning is to allow the restoration and revitalization and to create a community gathering place as has existed for 40 years at the Tears-McFarland house. And this image, and Scott, you could flip to the next one, show an idea or a concept for the renovated annex. And the rezoning will introduce some neighborhood serving and neighborhood scale commercial uses to include a cafe. As Scott mentioned, the annex would keep a 1-story height limit. And this whole effort also allows CHUN to remain at the Tears-McFarland house for their headquarters and continue their historic community center there and advance their mission. Next slide, please. The preservation of the Tears-McFarland house is assured because of the landmark designation. As you know, there can be no demolition of the structure, and Landmark Preservation Commission will have design purview over all exterior modifications. And that's also true for the reconstruction of the annex. Next. As staff identified, there is plan support and important criteria for the rezoning, and we check all the boxes here, as well as the soon to be adopted East Central Area Plan, as was mentioned in the staff report. Next. This rezoning implements, in particular in Blueprint, many of the complete neighborhood strategies and equity concepts. They are detailed on this slide, but by introducing uses at the building that are easily walkable and bikeable and have access to transit, there's an excellent opportunity to advance these Blueprint Denver concepts through the rezoning. Next. As staff described, there are justifying circumstances that support the rezoning as well. I won't belabor that one. It was done well in the staff report. Next, please. I've been doing the rezonings in Denver since 1994, and I never have seen such an extraordinary effort for community outreach and public engagement. It's been going on for 3 years. Other presenters will discuss this further, but there have been focus groups and surveys and open houses and neighborhood meetings and on and on. And the result is that a highly customized rezoning application and PUD were put together in response to community input. Next, please. This is a little bit of a recap, if you dove into the fine lines of this, of focus groups and responses in the hundreds that went through and identified uses that the community wanted to see at this location. And the PUD is designed to fulfill this vision. Next. We also did surveys. This is a little recap of the surveys. 80% of the respondents were within the CHUN boundaries. 60% say they visited the park frequently. And so it's a very centric input from nearby community members. Next, please. We also use social media, lots of posts, Facebook, electronic newsletters, and did everything we could to get the word out throughout the process. Next. We had media and all sorts of coverage in newspapers, in CHUN's newsletters, online, and these are just a sampling of some of the media coverage that we organized and asked for to make sure there was community awareness of the rezoning. Next. We believe that over 140 letters of support and emails have been turned in. Here's a small sampling of them. Whether it's in the 120s or 140s, it's substantial. That there is broad community support for this rezoning based on the extraordinary community outreach that has been undertaken. Next. We have many partners. These are representative of some of the tenants in the Tears-McFarland house and neighbors and organizations that are in support of the rezoning. This slide is outdated. I'm pleased to explain to the planning board that earlier today, we executed a good neighbor agreement with neighbors on the properties that immediately are adjacent to the Tears-McFarland house on the west and on the east. And the good neighbor agreement will be recorded and run with the property. It puts quite a lengthy list of restrictions and limitations on the operations of the house post rezoning. And it puts limitations well beyond what's allowed in the PUD. It addresses parking, hours of operation, noise and odor mitigation, deliveries and trash removal. It limits the size and types of special events that can occur here. And it puts requirements for neighborhood communications and operational requirements on the cafe. We've been working on this G&A for months. The hope of reaching a G&A is what resulted in the delay from the July date to this evening. And so it's very positive, and we're pleased to have had the opportunity to work with our neighbors on this. One last thing, if I can have 10 seconds since I'm coordinating with Scott, I ask on behalf of the applicant that the planning board recommend approval to City Council of the rezoning of 1290 Williams with a condition that the retail food establishment mobile use that is currently an allowed use in the PUD be removed from the PUD so that food trucks are not allowed. And this is as a result of our negotiations with the neighbors. And with that, I ask your approval, and I'm available to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will bring up the list of folks who've signed up to speak. You will have 3 minutes each. If you don't need your whole 3 minutes, we have a long list of folks here. Feel free to just let us know what portions you agree with somebody else, or shorten in any way that feels appropriate to you. That would be appreciated, but you'll have up to 3 minutes each. We have turned on the chat solely so that folks who are having problems when they're called on talking, having technical issues, can let us know. Otherwise, I just want to remind folks that the public comment that we're receiving should be entirely this verbal public comment, so that it's on the record. A chat on the side is not something that would be in the public record, so we shouldn't do anything substantive there, just technical support if you would. Okay, as you can see, our first 5 speakers will be Cindy Sestrich, Travis Lieker, Mark Cossin, Andrew Rogge, and Vickie Berkley. And I hope no one's keeping score of names I mispronounce. Cindy Sestrich.
Good afternoon. This rezoning request to a PUD to upgrade to a robust commercial use is not appropriate for the character of the surrounding neighborhood. The request isn't what CHUN has marketed publicly as this being just a nice little cafe to have a drink and a light lunch or breakfast. The people they show favoring the request have been misled. Also, the irony in this issue is the very organization that would normally represent us in the residential area is now the applicant. The request for increased use to a total of 12, well, now 11 uses, doesn't indicate a small change. The request now upgrades to outdoor sales and events, larger crowds and events, requiring a PA system, extended hours of daily operation, and intrusion into the public spaces of Cheeseman Park, 7 days a week. These uses are not in line with the merits of rezoning for a dense residentially surrounded area and park. The documents of the Cheeseman Park Master Plan and existing new draft of the East Central area do not nor request more robust commercial areas. We do have the Botanical Gardens that does large events with parking and all the necessary areas. We do have a lot of area restaurants that this does not need to compete with. Blueprint Denver Station statement about extending commercial areas is not appropriate for this property or area. This property does have limited access. This is a unique property, and that's in that it's surrounded by pedestrian access routes into the north of Cheeseman Park. This will adversely affect, and has not been proven that it will not, directly violate the goals of Net Zero campaign for pedestrian safety. There are many issues that haven't been worked out in this proposal. One major issue is the restaurant's main entrance, which you could see from the plan is directly into the north end of Cheeseman Park. And the plan doesn't really show it, but it's only 2 feet off of the Crusher Fine running path. They do not have a plan in place on how the intrusion into the running path of normal use in Cheeseman Park, nor the maintenance of the public property that will be directly increased, will be resolved. Who's going to be responsible for the increased funding of maintenance? They have refused our request to put a fence up without access onto Cheeseman Park, and you can see that the plans do show no fencing. And they need to relocate the entrance to 1290 Williams, but they refuse to do so. Instead, I have observed the negotiations for the past few months with just the last minute resolution as one.
Sorry, your time has expired. Would you like to put your name and address for the record? Only if you're comfortable.
Yes, I'm Cindy Sestrich. I live in the 1100 block of Lafayette on the west side of the park.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next speaker. Travis Lieker.
Greetings. My name is Travis Lieker, and I'm president of the board of directors for Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods. And I want to thank you, the Denver Community Planning and Development staff and team, and the Denver Planning Board for convening this meeting and for your efforts, especially in these unprecedented times. I would also like to thank the scores of colleagues and community leaders, most especially my fellow CHUN board members who have helped our organization get to this point. As Denver's largest, oldest registered neighborhood organization, CHUN is committed to preserving the past, improving the present, and planning for the future of Greater Capitol Hill. Through smart planning, historic preservation, community investments, and neighborhood programs, CHUN serves as a collective voice for the residents of its 10 neighborhoods. Since the early 2000s, CHUN has owned, managed, and been responsible for the upkeep and preservation of the historic Tears-McFarland property, which, as you all know, sits at the north end of Cheeseman Park. While the property is currently zoned for 20 stories of residential use, CHUN is mindful that a large structure of this nature is not something that would significantly alter the quality and character of our neighborhoods. The stunning architecture of the historic Tears-McFarland house is iconic. The mansion will remain largely as it is, except for some much needed restoration, paint, and structural work. To help preserve this historic landmark, CHUN has partnered with City Street investors, a partnership of longtime Denver residents who understand well the unique history and characteristics of our architectural gems in the city. Especially to build a new single-story neighborhood-friendly cafe designed to include the characteristics consistent with the Greater Capitol Hill community. All homes, and especially older historic homes, need maintenance and updating, especially after 40 years of deferred maintenance and upkeep, such as the case with the Tears-McFarland. The proposed rezoning, along with the neighborhood-friendly cafe, is intended for residents in the immediate surrounding area to meet with the neighbors in a pristine setting that is accessible, whether they walk, bike, bus, roll, or stroll from their home or neighborhood-based workplace. The house and property will continue to serve as a community asset where neighbors gather, meet to discuss issues, collaborate, and true to our mission, shape the future of Capitol Hill. Since September 2017, CHUN has garnered feedback from residents of all 10 Greater Capitol Hill neighborhoods, business owners, stakeholders, and they have overwhelmingly voiced delight and approval for our vision for the Tears-McFarland house. Many long-term residents favorably recall the cafe that once stood on the property in the early 1980s. CHUN understands that there's going to be some opposition to this proposal and is committed to working closely with our neighbors, as well as the recently announced Good Neighbor Agreement. The revitalization efforts and neighborhood-friendly cafe are designed for the community benefit and for the community to do what neighbors do best, and that's come together. And so I wanted to say thank you so much to the planning board and encourage you to recommend this to City Council for approval. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll have to scroll up to see the current speakers. There we are. Okay, our next 5 speakers, Mark Cossin, Andrew Rogge, Vickie Berkley, Alison Torvik, and Frank Locantore. Mark Cossin. Okay, Mark, looks like you are muted. There you are.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so mine's Cossin. I'm a former CHUN board member and current of Capital. I live at 1055 Corona for the record. That's what she's been. I support the rezoning in short because the project is and has from its inception been rooted in the ideal of community. Offering concessions and refreshments in or near public spaces is not new, it's not radical. I've heard that opposing voices want a thriving neighborhood that promotes safety for walking, jogging, and gathering with family and friends, and I want that too. The proposed plans for the Tears-McFarland house enhance and honor the character of the neighborhood. It allows space for more eyes on the street, or in this case, eyes on the park, which inherently improves safety. By the way, it'll also be a refuge from traffic, in contrast to other cafes that are just blocks of Cheeseman, which are often located on very busy streets. I disagree that the proposed PUD rezoning will increase parking problems. In fact, I would argue recent removal of parking along the North Park Road is having a much more significant impact on neighbors. When I think about the community, before 20-story towers loomed larger, I imagine back then neighbors were predicting, brought on by increases in traffic noise and a loss of available street parking. Yet today, I suspect no one would complain about the residential density and the real increased traffic that those towers have brought to the neighborhood.
Mark, Mark, I hate to interrupt. Mark, I hate to interrupt you. Can you hear me?
Created a proven track record for developing projects that have become beloved, vibrant forces for community gathering in and around Capitol Hill. I agree with opposing voices that no single organization can speak for an entire neighborhood. Capitol Hill Community Neighborhoods has grown into a vibrant, relevant organization led by thoughtful and engaged residents, and it does in fact speak for me and my neighbors. Cheeseman Park, once a cemetery, has evolved as a dynamic destination for families and individuals looking to enjoy outdoor space with friends and loved ones. This is due in large part to the past efforts and decisions made by city leaders. Yeah.
Mark,
yeah, I can.
We're having some audio technical difficulties in hearing you. So the 3 minutes did elapse, but I think we all had a challenge hearing. So what I might ask is that you try connecting back via your phone and then letting us know, and then we'll come back to you once you have a better audio
I'm sorry
connection.
if you can't hear me. Can you now?
I think we all were hearing your speech being slowed down and sped up. So if you don't mind calling back on the phone, we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Quite a delay there, and it's complicated. Okay, please remind me who the next speaker will be.
The next speaker is Mark Cossin.
That was Mark Cossin.
Or, apologies, Andrew Rogge.
Andrew Rogge, are you here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you'd start with your name and address for the record, please. You'll have 3 minutes.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Rogge, and I've been a CHUN board member since 2017. I am also a resident of the South City Park neighborhood, and that's 1530 Detroit Street. And last year, I became more involved with the community engagement efforts for the Tears-McFarland PUD. Professionally, I work as a senior planner for the city of Sheridan down in Arapahoe County. So planning issues are very near and dear to my heart. And as a planner, I'm also deeply aware of both the opportunities and challenges presented by writing a customized PUD document. So I would like to thank Scott Robinson with CPD for his time and knowledge in helping us create ours. I remember attending my first board meeting in 2017 and just being so impressed with the Tears-McFarland mansion, but then also realizing over the past 3 years how much work it truly needs in order to become a community gathering hub once again. During my time on the board, CHUN has engaged in extraordinary outreach efforts to both invite community feedback and then eventually to communicate our vision and really the neighborhood's vision for the Tears back to the neighborhood. A summary was provided with your packet today. However, I would like to touch on some of the key events and milestones that CHUN reached in its community engagement efforts. These include 3 community focus groups, which were held in fall of 2017 and which obtained specific feedback on the desired uses from over 50 participants. Annual updates at CHUN's membership meetings over the past 3 years that were well attended by anywhere from over 75 to 100 engaged community members. Multiple in-person meetings and open houses with our directly adjacent neighbors at 1 Cheeseman Place and the Highgate Townhomes. We also conducted surveys directly with park users during the summer of 2019 and collected over 125 responses from those. Over the course of the past 3 years, multiple articles have featured the project in Life on Capitol Hill and other local publications. CHUN has also used its social media, specifically Facebook, to conduct targeted Facebook posts that link to our project website and which have garnered thousands of unique impressions. CHUN has also obtained support letters from Denver nonprofit institutions such as PFLAG, which is a former tenant of the Tears, and Historic Denver, which holds a facade easement on our building. And then finally, we've also gathered well over 100 individual letters of support, and many of which were included in your packet today. So to conclude, I believe that CHUN has truly went above and beyond in communicating our plans for the future of the Tears-McFarland Mansion and PUD, and I enthusiastically urge that Planning Board recommend approval of the 1290 Williams PUD to Denver City Council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're still figuring out the best process to share the list of speakers here, so I'm not committing these to memory, unfortunately. We'll next have Vickie Berkley, then Alison Torvik, and Frank Locantore.
Good evening. I'm Vickie Berkley. I live on 9th and Logan in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and I'm involved with CHUN as Vice President of Community Engagement. I'm a professional in the field of community development and have worked for nearly 40 years assisting residents in enhancing their neighborhoods and small communities in Colorado as well as in states throughout the US. Last year, I joined the CHUN board, and now I can apply my years of experience to my own neighborhood. For example, during my first year on the board, I launched CHUN's Seed Awards, which are micro grants that encourage civic entrepreneurship and community engagement. In just the first year, CHUN awarded 12 Seed Awards to nonprofits and individuals, providing support to projects that improve safety, promote diversity, foster environmental stewardship, and provide enrichment. Now, urban planners know that third places have a number of important community building attributes, and the Tears-McFarland House has served as a third place in Capitol Hill for decades, providing a welcoming place where everyone is treated as social equals. This third place is playing a critical role in breaking down social silos in Denver, which is so important during these times of division. The Tears-McFarland House serves as a place where people can gather to discuss issues impacting our city and collaborate to shape the future of Capitol Hill. CHUN has sponsored a range of events over the years, inviting residents to get to know their neighbors and engage in projects that enhance our community. And CHUN has served as a neutral ground for sensitive topics, and the Tears-McFarland House has provided that third place for these meetings. As you saw in Bruce O'Donnell's presentation, for a number of years, a cafe did operate at the Tears-McFarland House where people could chat over coffee and a sandwich. Capitol Hill has no doubt benefited over the decades because people could utilize the Tears-McFarland House as a third place where they could hold fundraising events, holiday gatherings, and a host of other activities. And I'm excited about the partnership between CHUN and the City Street investors who have a proven record for creating amazing third places such as Union Station. This partnership will only improve the Tears-McFarland House as a valued neighborhood asset and continue to provide a third place that's open to all. I'm in favor of rezoning and request that the Denver Planning Board recommend approval to the Denver City Council for the rezoning of 1290 William Street to the PUD-G 23. Thank you so much for all you do for the city of Denver.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on the list is Alison Torvik. She does not appear to be online, so we will go to Frank Locantore.
Right. I think I'm unmuted, right?
We can hear you.
All right. My name is Frank Locantore. I live in City Park West. That's within the CHUN boundaries. And though I've never been a board delegate of CHUN, I've participated in many of their various committees, recruitment efforts, and I'm currently one of 3 co-chairs for their urban planning committee. And as you may remember, I'm also executive director of the Colfax Ave Business Improvement District, which is also located completely within CHUN's boundaries. I'm here to demonstrate support from the Colfax Ave Bid Board, who voted unanimously in support of the rezoning. And just to speak very briefly about this, the BID and CHUN have been good partners throughout the ages, but more so even over the last few years, and it's been a great value to the community of how we've been able to work together. My fear is that, well, let me put it this way: CHUN has existed for these many decades because they've been able to adapt. And if you know their history and the People's Fair and as it's come and gone, you can understand a little bit of that flavor. And this is just another way for them to adapt that meets all of the criteria, fits in well with what the community needs and desires are. And I'm really excited about this rezoning at a personal level as well. And so I want to express that very strong support, for them, for the rezone, their ability to renovate a historic landmark of the Tears-McFarland House. And I would I just fear that without a rezone, we could lose a great community asset because of, well, oftentimes the reason is parking, and that would be a horrible shame. So thank you very much, and please support this going to City Council.
Thank you very much. May we see the next 5 speakers? Okay, the next 5 speakers will be Patricia McHenry, Sandra Goldhaber, Constance Mortell, Joseph Vostres, and Greg Sorenson. Patricia McHenry.
Hi, this is Patricia McHenry with City Street Investors. I live at 653 Race Street, which is just south of the park in the CHUN district. And we would be partnering with CHUN on this redevelopment. And I thank every board member, and I certainly thank Scott for helping us with this PUD, which we have crafted together with Scott to meet what we heard from the neighborhoods through all the outreach that you've heard about already. But I wanted to share with you a little bit about City Street Investors. We are a locally owned real estate company. We invest in real estate and in restaurants. My partner, Joe Vostres, will speak to you later about our restaurant experience. In terms of our real estate experience, we primarily renovate historic buildings. We do some new builds as well, but as one of the speakers mentioned, we're involved in Union Station. In this specific CHUN neighborhood, we own 5 other buildings. They're highly embedded in the neighborhood. They are all leased to local tenants. And that is really what our passion is. So we're very sensitive on how we embed these commercial properties in these nice, great, dense, historic neighborhoods. I would like to put a lot of thanks into the neighbors to our west and to the east. We have been working very hard with them, and they've been working very hard with us to come up with a good neighbor agreement that addressed the concerns that you heard from the first speaker. And in fact, the Good Neighbor Agreement does actually require that we have a fence or barrier between the park. So, I think that that's all that I wanted to say, other than please support this for recommendation for approval for the City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Annalise, could you remind us who the next speaker is? Okay, Sandra Goldhaber.
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, and I think a couple of the previous speakers are still unmuted. If we could take care of that. Sandra, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Sandra Goldhaber, LCSW, and I live at 763 Race Street on the south end of the park. I come to you today wearing several hats in my support of the proposal for the Tears-McFarland house. I've been a longtime member of CHUN, many years, and recently joined as a board member. And one of my responsibilities on the CHUN board is to be a caretaker of the Tears house and ensure its future. I've also lived in the neighborhood for about 18 years. This is my 4th property adjoining or near the park. I've usually been a block off the park, either in a condo or a home. Have been through the landmark process and understand the importance of preserving the home's character and consistency with history. I've been a social worker in the neighborhood. I've worked with the Mental Health Center of Denver most recently and recently retired. But my first job as a baby social worker was working in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, working for the department of now called Human Services. And our team was housed at the Tears-McFarland house. And my desk looked out on the park from the gabled window on the 2nd floor. So I became kind of imprinted on the neighborhood. As a new board member, I attended a meeting this past January, and I was dismayed at the poor condition of the exterior of the house and at the deferred maintenance projects inside that needed to help in a needed upgrading for these modern times. As many of you know who own older homes, maintenance and upgrades are very costly. CHUN, as a not-for-profit, is limited in what it can do to maintain this 100-year-old beauty. That hence partnership with City Street, whose reputation is so highly regarded for such kinds of revitalization projects as Union Station, are the perfect partners for us. And the little cafe would help sustain financially the upkeep of the new improvements. I have 2 points that I want to bring up to support this project. First is enabling the preservation of the house as a single entity. As mentioned, a 20-story building could go up there, and that's something we want to avoid if at all possible. Second, improving the safety of the north end of the park by having eyes on the park with so many community neighbors, being able to have a cup of coffee, watch their kids play while they visit with their friends and discuss kind of important issues of the day. It's a beautiful old property, and I urge you to vote in favor of rezoning. Request that the planning board recommend approval to the city council for the rezoning at 1290 Williams to PUD-G 23. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Constance Mortell. Constance, you appear to be ready. Oh, there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Constance Mortell, I'm a homeowner at 1 Cheeseman Place, representing a significant number of neighbors opposed to this PUD. Why are we talking about a zoning change to allow a commercial bar restaurant in a residential zone? Shouldn't we consider an alternative for a property in the current zoning, housing, an urgent need in Denver? Funds are now becoming available city and statewide to help provide more housing. Tears-McFarland House is a house of 8,700 square feet plus an entire basement. Shared housing in this beautiful structure of some form of residential housing for seniors or individuals, particularly those with tenant-based vouchers, is what one hopes we would discuss. With CHUN maintaining their offices in Tears, their expertise in the community is a big plus. 95% of the townhouse owners directly on the east and 95% of the condo owners directly on the west of Tears-McFarland have signed letters opposed to the PUD's bar restaurant idea. Community input should be a critical part of this important decision. A more creative solution should be considered to support CHUN's financial needs. City Street investors could team up with the Parks Department directly, do a restaurant at the Boathouse in Washington Park if getting into the Denver parks is their intent. A park 4 times larger than Cheeseman with actual parking lots, recently renovated, all open on the U.S. Historic Park Registry for tax benefits, perfect for City Street's concept and their means of writing down their cost. Perhaps in addition to housing at Tears, the annex building behind could become a job training space and later become something like a coffee tea shop with 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. operating hours, serving the neighbors and park users in a quiet and neighborly fashion, giving the residents of Tears a chance to make a difference, be a part of a neighborhood in a meaningful way. As Stephanie Miller, a licensed professional family therapist and executive director of the Dolores Project stated, often those looking for supportive housing want to do something to give back. They want to make a constructive difference. What a wonderful difference City Streets could make in helping guide and counsel this small but important part of the Tears-McFarland property, rather than alienating many in the neighborhood with a commercial bar restaurant proposal with a full-time events person on staff for numerous parties and gatherings year-round. Talk about a lack of concern for your neighbors. Providing housing on the CHUN grounds rather than selling alcohol in the park is a much more sensitive and community-based approach, bringing the neighborhood together rather than dividing it. With the right ask, support from individuals, foundations, and corporations would assure a positive outcome for all concerned. Please consider there truly is another more community-friendly way to maintain CHUN's Tears-McFarland House. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joseph Vostres.
Good evening. First of all, thank you. Thank you to the staff and to our neighbors who have been working with so carefully over the last 3 years to move this important project forward. I'm Joe Vostres. I reside at 425 Syracuse Street in Denver, for the record. I thought I'd take a moment. You met my partner, Pat McHenry, earlier. I thought I'd take a moment to just tell you a little bit about us, in addition to what she shared. In addition to Denver Union Station, we've done projects at Hangar 2 in Lowry and the East Bridge project in the Central Park neighborhood, the newly named Central Park neighborhood. And we have a process that we use on all these projects, Union Station, Lowry, and in Central Park, that we call custom crafting. This is a process we started 3 years ago on the Tears-McFarland house, where we do a deep dive into the neighborhood. We do focus groups, we do surveys. And what we do is really try and understand the needs and desires of the neighbors and then craft a solution for the real estate around that. This has been by far the most in-depth one. I thought the one we did at Union Station was in-depth, but this one was far more in-depth. And the plan that we came up with really informed the PUD. So the uses, what's happening with the property are all really embodied in that PUD. So it's really, in some respects, the neighborhood's vision. The house has been a community asset for 40 years and has always hosted lots of events and other group meetings, and has really tried to be a gathering place for the neighborhood and really fulfill the mission of CHUN and its predecessors. But it was never financially sustainable. The house has deteriorated considerably, and the limitation on uses and the current zoning really sort of set it up to not be a sustainable place. So I think what we've come up with is a plan to make it sustainable and provide the neighborhood what they wanted. So as you know, we've completed a GNA, Good Neighbor Agreement, that I think really addresses many of the concerns that were brought up tonight. We're expert operators of food and beverage establishments, and we will do a great job here as we do in other locations. So I think we can mitigate all of the concerns, and just in closing, want to ask for your support and recommend this for approval to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next 5 speakers will be Greg Sorenson, Caroline Turner, Catherine Hance, James LaRue, and Michelle Steed. Greg Sorenson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for letting me speak. First, I would like to commend all of you for serving on the planning board. Volunteers seldom receive the recognition they deserve. Thank you. I am Greg Sorenson. I have lived in the Cheeseman Park area for 44 years, first on Marion Street and now at 1250 Humboldt Street, 2.5 blocks from the Tears-McFarland house. I'm here to talk about justifying circumstances. In their application, CHUN claims that the zoning change is justified due to changes in the neighborhood. The changes that I know of have been primarily small-scale residential development, such as infill housing, that is consistent with current zoning. Also, 2 large apartment condominium complexes have been built, as well as the Denver Botanic Gardens Friar Newman Center. I have not seen changes that call for a planned unit development that would allow extensive commercial activities in the midst of a residential area. The proposed development would fit in many other areas, but it does not fit in a small space on the north edge of Cheeseman Park, where there is virtually no parking and where thousands of vehicles use 13th Avenue daily. Exhibit Z of the zoning application states that, quote, commercial uses such as a coffee shop or food service do not exist within 1/4 mile of the 40-acre park, with the exception of what's offered in the Denver Botanical Gardens. This is not true. There are at least 24 businesses serving food and drink within 1/4 mile of the 80-acre Cheeseman Park, 6 on 13th Avenue, 13 on Colfax Avenue, 1 on 9th Avenue, 2 on 6th Avenue, and 2, soon to be 3, at Denver Botanic Gardens. A new cafe event center at 1290 Williams would directly compete with these established businesses, and it would be the only business directly on Cheeseman Park, perhaps an unfair advantage. If this commercial proposal were across the street from the park with access and parking, it might be more acceptable. But 1290 Williams is too small a property to accommodate these additional uses, far beyond what CHUN currently hosts. Rezoning this property for commercial interests is not in the best public interest because it is adjacent to a park that is valued for its quiet atmosphere and where citizens can recharge away from the city's hustle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Caroline Turner.
Hi, I am Caroline Turner, and I'm also an owner at One Cheeseman Place and have been on the border of the Cheeseman Park for nearly 20 years. I've been heavily involved in the negotiation of the GNA that you know was recently signed. I have a hard time understanding some of the conclusions of the planning staff, as Greg Sorenson just said. I believe the intended uses of the expanded Tears-McFarland building are much more of a change than Travis has characterized. There will be scores of events of all sizes, up to 200 people, not just meetings to discuss issues or a quiet cup of coffee. Inevitably, such activity will result in major impact on parking, traffic, and safety because of the size of the lot and it having only 9 parking spaces and limited site for access from and back onto 13th Avenue. While the GNA does not satisfactorily address all of our issues, it goes a long way. And so, as a good neighbor, I withdraw my opposition to this development.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Catherine Hance.
Hi, this is Catherine Hance. I also live at One Cheeseman Park, and I will keep my comments brief. I would just like to take the opportunity to thank, I'm on the board of One Cheeseman Place and have been participating in the negotiations of the Good Neighbor Agreement as well. I would just like to say thank you to CHUN and to City Street for their willingness to work with us and to reach an agreement with regard to the Good Neighbor Agreement. I think we both left that feeling like we gave a lot to each other, which is probably the best outcome in any agreement where you have people compromising. And so I appreciate it, and I withdraw my objections to the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is James LaRue. Do we have James?
It appears like James is no longer on the call, so we'll move to the next speaker, which is Michelle Steed.
Michelle Steed.
We have James in the,
Oh, I'm hearing something about James LaRue.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm here. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes if you'd like to start with your name and address.
Thank you very much. My name is James LaRue, and I live at 1050 Sherman Street in Cap Hill. As of December 2019, I think I'm the newest CHUN board member. I even got to attend one physical meeting before the pandemic hit. For 24 years, I was a public library director in the South Denver suburbs. Then I moved to Chicago for almost 3 years, where I lived and worked downtown. About 2 years ago, I came back to Colorado and chose Denver. At first because of access to the airport, but now for many other reasons. For 5 years now, I've been living without a car. I walk, bike, or take mass transit everywhere. It's been surprisingly easy in Denver. I've really enjoyed getting to know the neighborhood and bike paths. I probably walk or bike around Cheeseman Park 2 or 3 times a week, often with area friends. I'm really looking forward to biking to in-person CHUN meetings in the future and continuing my conversations with people after meetings or walks over a cup of coffee. We can't have too many warm and welcoming spaces in our community, and I'm proud to be part of making those spaces. As a longtime practitioner of community-centered planning in my work life, I find the vision for the future of Tears-McFarland House pretty compelling. Beyond the other things my colleagues have mentioned, it really contributes to a rich and engaging civic pedestrian life. I've been impressed by the persistent and overwhelmingly positive outreach of CHUN to the community, both over the past 50 years and as evidenced by our work on a good neighborhood agreement around this project. So I'm in favor of the rezoning and request that the Denver Planning Board recommend approval to the council. And thank you very much for your time and attention. I know the work that goes into balancing the interests of community members, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Michelle Steed, and following Michelle will be Peggy Randall, Bruce Caughey, and I do look forward to everybody telling me how their names should be pronounced, Jay Rust, Kathleen Rust, and Joel Brown. Michelle Steed.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Thanks. My name is Michelle Steed. I live at 554 Gilpin Street, which is located just a few blocks south of Cheeseman Park. I'm a stay-at-home mom and a frequent user of the park. I'm also a current member of CHUN, and I was on the board of delegates for CHUN's Neighborhood 9 for several years. I support the rezoning of 1290 William Street for a few reasons. The first, when CHUN faced a severe financial crisis a few years ago, I volunteered on a weekly basis in the office to help keep the organization solvent. In that time, it became clear to me how the years of needs and lack of resources have not been kind to this beautiful historic property. It'll be wonderful to see it restored to its former glory and become a place where the neighborhood can enjoy. Secondly, I want to talk about my experience with both CHUN and City Street investors. I live just halfway down the block from a PUD on 6th Avenue that's managed by City Street investors. And they've been really good neighbors. When there were some proposed changes to that PUD, I was a little scared about the changes to my neighborhood, but everything has been really positive. The property is clean, it's well taken care of. Any sort of thing that happens, it's immediately addressed. The next thing, I believe that having the PUD adjacent to the park will make the park safer for someone who walks around the park all the time. That's my belief. After more than 3 years of planning and organizing, the community is within reach of developing a renewed vision that is consistent with the past uses, but adapts to the changes in the neighborhood. I'm hopeful that the planning board will approve the rezoning request and help CHUN deliver the vision to the neighborhood that the neighborhood helped shape. I think this is consistent with CHUN's mission, which says preserving the past, improving the present, and planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Peggy Randall.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you, members of the Planning Board. I appreciate your time this evening. Hello, my name is Peggy Randall, and I'm currently a patient navigator through Anschutz Medical Center at UC Health. I care about people and our community. And for 20 years, I've lived in the Country Club Historic Neighborhood, one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in Denver. I love Denver's rich history, and I want to preserve it into our future. I've lived in Denver for over 50 years, and I've certainly watched it grow into the dynamic city it has become. I am honored to be serving on the board of CHUN, representing Neighborhood 9, where our mission statement is, as was just mentioned by Michelle, is to, in preserving the past, improving the present, and planning for the future. I'm passionate about historic preservation, and I want to see the Tears-McFarland House live on for future generations. To conclude, that is why I am in favor of 1290 Williams rezoning. I resoundingly vote yes on the approval of the zoning request of the PUD-G 23 to City Council. And I believe in creating something visionary for our Capitol Hill community to share and grow us into our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bruce Caughey.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Bruce Caughey. You did a nice job pronouncing my name. Most people can't do that. I appreciate your service and listening to the testimony tonight from people who are concerned and care about Cheeseman Park. My wife and I live at 1394 Vine Street. I'm a retired educator and nonprofit leader, co-author of the Colorado Guide and Colorado's Best, best-selling guidebooks about our state, a multi-generational Coloradan. My grandparents lived at 9th and Rays. My parents lived at 12th and Rays. And my wife and I live just a couple of blocks away. And I'm here to support the application to PUD-G 23 for this project. My connection to CHUN is primarily because I love this neighborhood. In some families, a river runs through it, and in my family, Cheeseman Park runs through it. We care deeply about this park and the resource that it is. We love the beauty, we love the energy that comes from people using the park, as well as the history of this amazing resource. I would never advocate for anything that would take away from one of Denver's crown jewels. I joined the CHUN board in order to play a role in an organization that promotes our neighborhood through good works, grants, and other projects. I appreciate CHUN's long involvement with history, zoning, and policies that benefit our entire community with a mindset of equity, access, and inclusion for residents. I am co-chair of the History Matters Committee, and I'm very concerned about the Tears-McFarland mansion because of the deferred maintenance that has occurred over many years, as you've heard. It can create a potential hardship for this organization that I care so much about. I believe this public-private partnership makes great sense on so many levels, and we have been working very hard to make sure that full information is available to neighbors and people who care about this. Bottom line, this is a great project that creates a lasting community resource in keeping the history of the area. I recommend approval of a zoning request to the City Council as it's consistent with city plans and an optimal use of this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Jay Rust. You should be able to go off mute. Hello.
Hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Joe, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes,
Thank
Jay.
you. I'm Jay Rust, residing at 1299 Gilpin Street, number 15E since 1998. I'm a member of residents that formed Friends and Neighbors for Cheeseman Park in 2003, a registered neighborhood organization with the city and county of Denver. We are a park advocate organization working to enhance park users' experiences at Cheeseman Park. The State Historical Association awarded Cheeseman Park a $100,000 grant for the creation of the Cheeseman Park Historic Landscape Assessment and Master Plan. Consulting firm Mundus Bishop worked with Cheeseman's neighbors and Parks and Recreation for a year to collaboratively finalize a comprehensive master plan adopted in 2008. The neighbors agreed upon master plan goals used to guide all future rehabilitation and capital projects include: restore Cheeseman Park's legacy through historic preservation, create an accessible park with a pedestrian focus, create a safe and enjoyable park experience for all park users, reduce crime, vehicular volume, noise, and pollution. Funding for the master plan's improvements were provided from a bond election, awarding $2 million to Cheeseman. As stated many times in the master plan, Cheeseman Park is a passive park, a green oasis in a dense part of the city, a restful retreat enjoyed by walkers, runners, picnickers, and those reading books. The proposed PUD rezoning application will alter the passive nature of Cheesman Park. CHUN's mansion is located directly next to the park on its north side. It is not consistent with the present residential zoning. The East Central Area Plan Public Draft 2 does not recognize any additional commercial areas on 13th Avenue. It states that only existing commercial areas may be improved, thus maintaining the quiet, predictable atmosphere of adjacent residential areas. The PUD application allows commercial establishment offering a comprehensive restaurant menu, including selling beer, wine, spirits, and specialty drinks.
30 seconds.
A robust event center. Events of all kinds with hundreds of participants inside and outside without adequate parking. Seasonal outdoor sales. Food sale markets. Outdoor retail sales and displays. Repair services.
11 seconds.
Join Cheesman Park neighborhoods in not supporting the PUD application, resulting in the protection and passive and quiet atmosphere that is currently enjoyed by park users and neighbors. Respectfully submitted, J.H. Rust, President, Fans for Cheesman Park.
Thank you very much. Kathleen Rust.
Even though it said Kathleen before, this is Kathleen now. And
hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us this evening. My name's Kathleen Rust. I'm a native of Denver, resident at Park Towers, 13th and Gilpin for 22 years. I'm the president of the Cheesman Park Advocacy Group, although I'm speaking for myself this evening. We all love to frequent good coffee shops, eating amazing ice cream and dining at restaurants serving great food with brews and cocktails. CSI, City Streets, they've developed such commercial businesses at Union Station. They had access to parking, transit, entertainment, space to accommodate patrons without negatively impacting that neighborhood. A good business idea in the right location. How about Novo, another CSI project, a popular place in a commercial setting for meetings, lattes, and computing. Patrons have access to parking. Neighbors are not burdened by noise, cooking odors, delivery trucks, or outside events. A good business idea in the right location. Is Tears-McFarland property on 13th and Williams a good location for the proposed PUD rezoning, allowing a new commercial use, including restaurant, bar, and enhanced entertainment event center in the Tears-McFarland Annex in our residential neighborhood in the Cheesman Park area? Applicants think this is a great location for their indoor-outdoor cafe, restaurant, bar, serving up to 100 patrons 7 days a week, 13 to 15 hours a day. Their enhanced event center at the Tears-McFarland House Cafe and Bar area, accommodating up to 200 guests for private functions and events, and unlimited CHUN-sponsored programs and events, will cause problems for the nearby neighbors living within 16 feet of this commercial operation, even with the GNA. Reasons why this is the wrong location for this proposed enterprise. 1, the restaurant bar will be directly next to Cheesman, literally feet away from the heavily used Crusher Fine Trail, walking running path in the north end of Cheesman. The access to the restaurant bar from the park, customers will have to cut across the grass and the running path. Bike riders will ride illegally on the Crusher Trail to access the restaurant. This sets up conflict between park patrons and customers. I can't believe I only have 27 seconds. The planned use of the valet services of applicants to mitigate the lack of parking will be limited. According to the GNA signed today, private events will require them to use valet services only for private events. Their own events of 200 will have no such limitation. This will greatly impact our neighborhood. Please reconsider. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joel Brown, and then following Joel Brown, Nicole Malo, Gary Hagopian,
Oh,
Debbie
shit.
Young.
Hello.
And yes, if we could mute the previous speakers. Joel Brown, you'll be next. I'm just announcing who's coming up after you. Nicole Malo, Gary Hagopian, Debbie Young, Dmitry Zavrotny, and William DeMaio. Joel Brown.
Hello, my name is Joel Brown. I live at 1801 Pennsylvania Street, and I'm here to support the rezoning of the Tears-McFarland mansion. As a CHUN member, I've had the opportunity to tour the house and view the history contained within its walls. It is clear to me that this house has been a community gathering place for many years. I have viewed pictures of community events hosted at the house going decades back. The Tears and McFarland families donated their property for community use just such as this. I hope this property can continue to be preserved while serving as a community meeting place. I believe this proposal respects the needs of all stakeholders, and I'm happy to see such community engagement through the Good Neighbor Agreement and its support for this project. Please vote yes on the approval of the zoning request to PUD.
Thank you. Next, we have Nicole Malo.
Good evening, planning board members and staff. Nicole Malo, 863 Monroe Street. I'm a property owner in Hilltop and Congress Park, and also, as previously mentioned, a board member of the Hilltop Civic Association, but my comments are not representative of the association. As a passionate urban planner, realtor, and engaged neighbor, as well as a sixth-generation Denver local, I'm continuously involved in local neighborhood planning issues and organizations such as Inc., CHUN, and Historic Denver. My comments are in support of the proposed rezoning of the historic Tears-McFarland house. Similar to the historic Malo mansion at my great-grandfather's home, which is located next to the governor's mansion, many of Denver's older architectural gems are at risk of deterioration if they aren't given the opportunity to adapt to current community needs, and are certainly doomed without sustained financial support. The proposed rezoning is a very creative way to generate money to revive and sustain the historic building, allow CHUN to stay in its relevant location, and activate the northern end of the park. Further, it is notable that Joe Vostres, who has had a recipe for success in restaurants, is part of the public-private partnership to help sustain this landmark structure. I walk the park every day, and I'm thrilled at the opportunity to sit with my neighbors at a park cafe, something that's very common to urban parks, particularly of this grace and magnitude. Seeing that the proposal has extensive community support and is consistent with all plans, I urge you to recommend approval and support of the Tears-McFarland house rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Hagopian.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, Mr. Nobel, thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. My name's Gary Hagopian. I live at 1291 High Street, Unit J. I'm 16 feet from the new restaurant. The neighbors and I had a number of concerns with having a restaurant and cafe right in the middle of our residential area. We've negotiated a good neighborhood agreement with CHUN and City Street investors. It was intense, it was emotional, it was passionate, and we've gotten to a point of agreement. So I'm withdrawing my objection to the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Debbie Young.
And I believe she dropped off the call, seeing that her name was further down the list. So we'll move to the next name unless we see her pop back on.
All right, Dmitry Zavrotny. Do we see Mr. Zabrotny?
It looks like he too has dropped off the call. Sorry, we didn't catch that right away.
That's all right. Our final speakers will be William DeMaio, Mary Gershwin, Rachel Griffin, Andy Baldega, and then we will go back to Mark Cossin if he's online. He had technical difficulties before. William DeMaio.
Yes, thank you, board, for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Bill DeMaio, and until very recently, I lived at 734 Cook Street in the Congress Park neighborhood. In my 10 years as a volunteer on the CHUN board, I was the co-vice president of the Tears-McFarland House, which meant that we kept the toilets flushing and the lights actually working. And through that time, you know, we've had several SHF grants, State Historic Fund grants, fundraisers, donated labor. The effort to keep that property up and running is almost Herculean. So I would urge the board to approve this rezoning to keep this property and restore this property back to its previous state and allow it to continue as a wonderful community asset. So appreciate your time and urge you to support us.
Thank you. Mary Gershwin.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Well, first of all, I really want to thank this committee for your volunteer and tireless service and the long meetings you do. This is a lot of work. I also, I'm a resident at 1 Cheeseman Place, and I want to thank the leadership in my board for the work they've done to try to get to an agreement. I want to speak out on behalf of the over 130 letters in opposition that you have received. Remembering that without an organizing group, for 130 people to speak out against something, I hope would gather your attention. And that's what I'm asking as we close this meeting, and asking, what would it take for you to reconsider? The first issue I have, I don't think that they've been addressed. People have we've talked about the area, talked about commercial buildings, about residential buildings, but in the early discussion, there was very little discussion of the park. The park is an activated area. I see every day as strollers move into the park, as bicyclists move into the park. This proposal will block pedestrian access as more people need to park, and will be fighting for that pedestrian access. It will commercialize the park. It will bring alcohol into that region, into that area. There is no plan for parking, with 9 parking spaces and events of 100 people in an area where it's difficult to find parking at all times of the day. And finally, the questions of safety. I'm concerned about safety of pedestrians. Safety is all the families that I see streaming into the park from high density residential north of 13th Avenue, coming into that quiet space where now they will be competing with more traffic with no place to park. The reality is that your decision is not taking place in a vacuum. What I have heard you all talk about so much through these meetings is about affordable housing. And my question is, why are you considering taking a building which could be used for affordable housing when the community is willing to come together? The 132 people who wrote letters are more than willing to work with CHUN. We're ready to be partners. We're ready to come together. I could imagine a group housing that would be dedicated to young leaders in Denver, where they could live for a year together with CHUN and work to support this community. So at this point, I just ask, what would you like your legacy to be? Will you be the board that recommends commercializing the park? Or will you stop and think about what you're doing?
Thank you. Okay, I see that Dmitry Zavrotny, who we called on previously, is no longer present, is back. He's back. Mr. Zavrotny, can we find you?
All right. Sorry about that earlier.
That's right. You have 3 minutes if you'd start with your name and address for the record.
Sure. It's Dmitry Zavarotny. I live at 1950 North Logan Street, and that's in the North Capitol neighborhood. And I'm also a member of the board of CHUN, as well as one of the co-chairs of the Urban Planning Committee. And I'm just here to speak in favor of this rezoning. You know, I moved, I mean, I've lived in Denver for over a decade, but I've moved to North Capitol Hill for a reason, and that's the proximity to all these great parks. I mean, I'm about 12-minute bike ride to Cheeseman, and I make that ride frequently. I do not drive to this park. There's no point in driving to a place like that. It's, you know, I love what they've done with closing some of the streets to pedestrian access and making it even more activated. You know, I think CHUN, you know, I've only been a part of CHUN for a couple of years, but CHUN has been an institution within these neighborhoods and with this park specifically. You know, I think we've done a lot of great work for outreach. I, you know, personally did a bunch of surveys over a year and a half ago in the park. You know, and it's, you know, I think we went well above and beyond to gain as much support as we can. You know, I think with all the things happening with the East Area Plan changes and, you know, Denver is a quickly changing city, and I think this PUD provides some certainty and predictability around the revitalization of this historic structure. I mean, this is a 100-year-old structure that's needed a lot of maintenance, has gone through lots of ups and downs, both you know, related to Denver's economy and to the structure itself. And I think it would be a shame to lose that legacy due to a lack of flexibility. I would personally love to see it used as a great amenity space for other uses. And I think this is going to be a great asset to this park. It's additionally with all of these plans, you know, the comp plan, 2040 blueprint, and then the upcoming East Central Area Plan. I think it's consistent with all of those, and it doesn't make sense to not support this when it checks all the boxes and meets all the criteria. And I think, you know, this is a changing city, and we need to change with the times. This is going to be a great use, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we heard from Mary Gershwin. Rachel Griffin does not appear to be online. Let's just check it again. Rachel Griffin does appear to be online now.
She is back on.
Fantastic.
I'm here.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
We can. You have 3 minutes if you'd start with your name and address for the record if you're comfortable.
Great. Yes, I'm Rachel Griffin. I live at 1325 North Lafayette Street, and I have lived there for 15 to about 20 years.
The time is yours.
Okay, great. Over the past 10 years, I've helped coordinate and run the Capitol Hill Parents Group. We are a division of CHUN, and we focus on parent advocacy in the neighborhood. We plan special community events, social activities, learning groups, networking, communication sharing, and more. We listen very closely to the needs of Capitol Hill area parents. And one thing that we've heard in our feedback that is sorely missing is a high-quality community center with high-quality programming. Parents within the CHUN boundaries are thrilled and excited to see the opportunities that will become available if this zoning were to go through. One thing we do hear in our feedback when I go to meetings is a lot of sometimes city staff, but just the community says, why do we need activities and services for children? There are no children in Capitol Hill. And I counter that with, well, there are. You just don't see them because we have nowhere to go. We go to Cheeseman Park. We go to restaurants. But we go to the library. But as far as activities and community centers, this will satisfy that need. We have numerous plans for this community center. We have developed a relationship with Denver Public Library to offer this center as an annex for lectures and activities. Parents within the CHUN boundaries do not always have access to the public library unless they live on the west boundary. It's not as easy to walk to that library as you'd think with children. This will fill that gap. This is just one example of the community events we hope to offer. As parents in Capitol Hill, we feel this rezoning contributes strongly to neighborhood character, community building, and most importantly, age diversity in our neighborhood. And that's my take. I've been on the board for almost 20 years now and have young children, and I see that this is would be an amazing opportunity to provide for children, which is a much overlooked demographic in Capitol Hill.
Thank you. Andrew Baldega.
Hello, this is Andy Baldega. I live in the South City Park neighborhood.
We can hear you.
You can?
Yep.
So, okay, sorry, I got this other one on. Sorry. Okay, sorry. South City Park neighborhood. I think this is a unique solution for a unique property, and it should be supported. The Cheeseman Park neighborhood is unique in Denver in that it has high rises surrounding it instead of a major street. It does have a road going through it, but even in these COVID days, that's been closed and has added, I think, as one of the previous speakers said, has added to the usefulness of the park, and it has not impacted the people that visit the park. The park is packed regularly, weekdays, weeknights, or week evenings, and certainly on the weekends. So the concern of parking or 9 parking spaces regarding this proposed PUD is not necessarily a concern in this neighborhood. The Capitol Hill Cheeseman Park neighborhood has numerous businesses that survive with minimal parking, as it is a very walkable and bikeable space. This community center will enhance the park and enhance the Tears-McFarland building and enhance the CHUN programming. And as people had said previously, the City Streets partnership is one that we feel can be relied upon given their previous track record of successful developments. One of the things that changed the Cheeseman Park in the time that I've lived here in the last, I don't know, 15 plus years, was an investment by the city in renovating the interior portions of it and introducing sidewalks and renovating the playground space and some of the historic structures in that park area, putting in that Crusher Finds path. So that, I think, change is one of the reasons this now is the time to support the cafe at the, or whatever this building might hold, at the edge of the park, because the park has changed from what it was 15 years ago, and that justifies the change. I encourage you to support this rezoning. I suppose the only thing that is an unfortunate piece is the fact that the 9 spaces are listed as a requirement. In the PUD, it seems as though that would make it difficult to get rid of those in the future should that pedestrian access point prove to be and beautified and supported by others. But those 9 spaces just seem to be an excessive request. Needless to say, please support the zoning request. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Mark Cossin. He had technical issues before. We struggled to follow along. It was going slow, it was going fast, it was terribly strange. Let's hope this works better.
And I'm incredibly embarrassed. Can you hear me now?
It sounds perfect, and you wouldn't have had any way of knowing, so.
And I'm in technology, which is the ironic thing here. You said at the beginning of this, if other folks had sort of echoed what what my comments would be, that I would just give up my time. I'm going to do a little bit of that. Vickie, Sandra, Frank, Michelle, Peggy, Bruce, they've all sort of pointed out why I support this. I'll just say that I was a former CHUN board member. I'm a member of CHUN now, and I'm a current resident of Capitol Hill, 1055 Corona. And I volunteered when CHUN was going through its very dire, times where we were not, we didn't know if we were going to have the lights on the next day. And we had large events, weddings, several events at the what everyone's calling an event center. It's really not an event center. It's a place where people gather and share, and make memories. We always had really good community feedback. I think the only negative thing were the townhomes next door. There were occasions where, weddings would go on till 11 o'clock, 11:30, and they didn't appreciate that. So I'm happy to hear that the good neighbor agreements are in works and that folks are signing on to that. So I do urge the planning board to recommend approval to City Council of PUD-G 23. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our list of public speakers. We'll now turn to questions from the board to staff, the applicants, or any of our speakers. And I'll look for hands and make a queue of board members. I see Dawn first. Go ahead.
I always raise my hand and then I forget to unmute. So there we go. I have 3 questions. I'll try to keep it short. A number of comments. This is probably to Scott, but it might be to Bruce. A number of comments have kind of emphasized the level of activity. There's not much going on there now, but there'll be a lot in the future. What are the restrictions on CHUN's activities today without the good neighbor agreement or the PUD? Because I see activity there regularly, both on the patio and in the house when I'm running by. Are there limits? Are there numerical limits today that say, well, CHUN can't do very much in the outside patio or the annex today?
So within the allowed uses under the existing GMU 20 U03, there are uses that are allowed: residential, non-medical office, bed and breakfast, and art studio. And then beyond that, there aren't further limits really on number of meetings they can have or number of people that can attend those meetings beyond what's set by the fire code within the building.
I should have been clearer. I meant temporary events, because I guess, let me ask it a different way. CHUN today host a wedding reception on the patio every night if it felt like it?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I ask it kind of as a loaded question because I'm not sure there are limits. There are temporary limits and there may be temporary. Maybe Annalise knows the answer to that question. Annalise, do you know?
I'm going to reference the code because if I go off of memory, I'll give you an inaccurate number. So I will follow up once we have an accurate response.
Okay. All right. A second question, Scott. Maybe one of the criteria for PUD zoning is that this can't be achieved under a different zone district. And I've been kind of firm in my general dislike of PUDs that means what it says. Is the reason why sub area B, which is a 5,000 square foot parcel, couldn't be its own zone district? Why this couldn't have come in as a zoning of sub area? Let me ask it and then explore it a little bit further. I know that's not what the applicant asked for, but it's one of the criteria. We have to find that they couldn't do it in a way.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Sub area B doesn't have access to a right of way. It's between the park and an alley and otherwise cut off by the rest of the property. So it wouldn't be able to be its own lot, its own lot.
Well, okay, that's fine. Last question. I'm kind of intrigued. The current building in the annex is 1,500 square feet. The PUD allows 3,500 square feet, which is still not a big number, but there's also a provision in the PUD that the building in sub-area B can't occupy more than 50% of the zone lot. Is the zone lot both A and B together, or is it just B? Because 50% of a 5,000 square foot parcel, sub-area B, is 2,500 square feet.
Yeah, it's zone mod is the entire property, but sub areas A and B.
Okay. So the 50% applies, and it's not a limit. The 3,500 is the limit on what's going on here. Okay, and there's just a related question which I was exploring in my head. Right now, it's what they have now is a nice combination of an indoor space and an outdoor space. As I read the PUD, the maximum dimension on the annex as it's rebuilt, or the building for the annex, is 70 feet. So I guess I just want somebody to confirm. As I look at it, there's 125 feet of frontage along Cheeseman Park, and the maximum dimension of the annex replacement building is 70 feet, which means some part of that patio will remain. Maybe this is a question for Bruce. I guess I'm asking because I was thinking all of a sudden, could they just occupy the entire frontage of Cheeseman Park with an annex replacement building? And as I read the PUD, they can't, because that's 125 feet of frontage. Max building dimension is 70 feet. Is that right?
This is Bruce Odonell. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Don, for that question. You're correct. The dimension of the building is limited so that it cannot occupy the entire park frontage, and therefore preserving the patio and open landscape area west of the building.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. Those are my questions, and they really get a little bit of curiosity, but really compatibility, which affects some of the criteria to decide about, especially the PUD criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Gosha.
Yes, thank you. So question for the applicant, please. So it's somewhat speculative, but because it came up in a couple of questions, I want to ask about affordable housing. Has this been discussed with the neighborhood, evaluated? And if so, what was the reception of the neighbors in regards to possible affordable housing in the building?
Thank you. This is Bruce again. And one of the attributes of the PUD is that it's based upon GMU3, as we've discussed, and MU being multi-unit. And so every residential use that's allowed in MU is an allowed use in the PUD. And so that creates the flexibility that it could be used for residential purposes. And so that's not off the table. However, that's not the intent of the applicant. And we have had no discussions about affordable housing with the community. And in fact, the testimony this evening was the first time we've ever heard that come up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Erin.
Thank you. So I have, part of this is some of what Don was getting to in terms of, I guess I'm struggling with the parking and the special events. So are we still awaiting an answer on what events and what size of events are currently hosted at the property?
Yes, we're still.
I'll allow for the applicant to speak to what's currently being posted. We still can't find an exact answer on what the zoning code specifically allows for those limitations. Working on it.
Thank you. And so this is Bruce again. And I would respond as follows. Whatever uses are allowed in the current zoning are entirely unrestricted. And so CHUN could operate as long as they're in compliance with the zoning. They could operate all hours of the day, every day of the year, etc. The GNA puts significant limitations on that. And so the property, because of the GNA, is subject to limitations that is not afforded in the zoning. an example of this, or related to this, is the discussion about the parking and the special events and so forth. And so in the GNA for private events, the GNA requires that valet parking be provided for events with 30 or more people. And it does not apply to CHUN events because CHUN does not have that restriction today. And so it didn't make sense to constrain CHUN when they're not constrained today. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I think it's important to express that because, yeah, we're seeing here up to 200 people. I just looking, it's a little hard for me just knowing that, you know, there was a recent affordable housing that was not permitted because of a lack of parking. And here we have up to 200 people at an event. But I take your point in terms of when it's a special event and they could host those now. But I think it's important that we're seeing now that that you've worked directly with the neighbors on this agreement. So I think my other questions were really addressed by Dawn, so I will stop for now.
Okay, in the queue, I have Heidi and then Angel.
Thanks, Joel, and thank you to everybody who took the time out to speak tonight, especially since it's later than usual. I have a question for Scott about the East area, or sorry, the East Central plan. So a number of the neighbors who were in opposition or had concerns brought up lack of consistency with neighborhood plans. So I spent a good bit of time looking at both plans that could apply depending on how council votes and how you all voted earlier. And I'm curious, in the East Central plan, I'm on page of the PDF 234, which is page 229 of the plan. One of the Cheeseman Park recommendations is to promote the continued success of cultural institutions while managing impacts. And there's the sub goal is working with them to identify long-term goals for continued success, growth, and development. I was just curious why you felt like that wasn't a criteria that you felt like may be consistent with the intent here of the application, if maybe it was the definition of cultural institution. So that's just my question. Was there consideration? Did it see one?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. When we wrote that policy, that recommendation, we were intending it really to apply to the Botanic Gardens as the big cultural institution in the neighborhood. We have that recommendation for the major institutions in East Central: Botanic Gardens, the Museum of Nature and Science, the zoo. So that's what I was thinking of with that recommendation, and so that's why I didn't apply it to this. But we don't specifically define cultural institutions. So I think if you want to interpret CHUN as a cultural institution, then yes, this could potentially apply to that as well.
Thank you. And the reason that having looked at the 1993 plan and some of the historical information in that plan, in terms of some of the events that happened, I felt like, potentially you could argue that maybe not CHUN, but that the house itself functions as a cultural institution, or certainly did in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument to make.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Angel.
Yes, hi. This, I think, my other question for Scott, and it's related to public safety. And I heard a few comments in the testimonies about the property being in ill repair currently. And I am just wondering more about that. If these upgrades, renovations, whatever happens with a rezoning do not occur, is the current property in such ill repair that it isn't safe to continue being used as it is?
I'm not a building expert, building safety expert, but we have building inspectors that keep track of particularly landmark structures to make sure that they're still in good repair. And I haven't heard anything specific about this property that it's an immediate safety issue that the property needs to be condemned or anything like that. I can perhaps have Bruce speak more to the specific issues with the property, but as far as I know, there's no immediate life safety threats on the property.
This is Bruce, and I think that we'd be happy to address this question, but that Travis, the head of CHUN, is probably better suited than I to answer the question. If you'd like to authorize him to speak.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you so much, Bruce and Scott, for supporting us on that question. About 4 years ago, the CHUN board, and this preceded my time as chair of the board, conducted a pretty extensive analysis of expenditures and deferred maintenance. And at that time, the ballpark estimate for, and I think this was included in your packet, and if not, we're happy to provide it as a follow-up, had about $250,000 to $300,000 worth of deferred maintenance. But if we were to look at the entirety of what is necessary for the property, and that's regarding electrical upgrades, safety, foundation cracks, repairs to the sidewalk, mobility access and the like, it would be to the tune of $2 million. And at that time, when I did become board chair, CHUN was effectively bankrupt. And so we didn't have the resources nor the capacity at the time to even chip away at some of the immediate needs. And while we have recovered from a financial perspective, we have not been able to address the long-term needs of the property, only band-aid some of the immediate issues such as electrical functionality. But to Scott's earlier points, there are no life-threatening or safety-threatening situations with respect to the property as it is.
Thank you.
Okay, Heidi. See your hand up. That may be from before.
That's my problem. I'll lower it now.
Okay. I have just a few questions. I see that we have Gordon Robertson from Parks and Rec on. If I could invite you to participate here. A lot of our comments and concerns had to do with commercializing the park. That was a phrase used throughout the written comments we received, as well as reference to park master plan. Jay Rust and others talked about that. Can you tell us about, there's this interesting regulatory distinction. The private property is regulated by zoning. The park property is regulated by Parks and Rec. But tell us about, for compatibility, the intention behind those parks plans and the intention behind what we're hearing is a passive park.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Gordon Robertson. I'm the Director of Park Planning, Design, and Construction for Denver. It's a wide open question. Excuse my dog in the background. It is a wide open and varied question. I think we touched on the issue, but I would say the master plan was much more focused on the park edge to the interior and how that space was organized and used. I know as a department and as a comprehensive plan, our interest is in making sure that we are not silos and that land use is looked at in multiple ways. And so we believe that park edges should be, in many cases, activated. I don't want to weigh in as to whether this is a positive use for the neighborhood or not. That's a neighborhood conversation. It's been a robust one tonight, and I've appreciated both sides of the conversation. I will say that that this use seems compatible for a park edge, and that if there was a negative aspect of this, we would be speaking up. But as of what we've learned about this development, we don't think that there's a negative connotation to it for the park purpose. And in many cases, active edges are positives in parks, and Denver is lacking that generally speaking. Whether this is the right place and the right park certainly is debatable, but we don't see a negative to this proposal.
Okay. And then we also heard concerns about access to this property. If it had a more of a coming and going use, not just an event use, but a cafe kind of use where people are coming and going, a lot of foot traffic, a lot of bike traffic coming through the park. And one speaker mentioned that bikes aren't allowed. Perhaps those bikes weren't allowed on certain paths. Can you tell us about that, and if you have any concerns about that?
Yeah, that would be a concern, absolutely. I believe since this is, I think, a zoning conversation,
yes,
it's hard to get into the details of what needs to be designed to accommodate that use, or if there is anything. But I think that's maybe a conversation we would definitely and absolutely want to have at a later date when and if this goes forward, because that would be a potential negative on the park if it wasn't. The access wasn't done in a responsible way. We would ensure that that there would not be traffic through the lawn, and so if there needed to be accommodation to not allow that to happen, that might be a requirement we would put on the developer. But right now there is an intrusion into the park that's going to be removed, so that's a benefit. But with respect to the coming and going use, we think in many ways that's a positive. It just needs to be designed correctly.
Okay, so when you said a negative, it's not an incompatible use, but people walking over an unpaved part, making a muddy trail is a risk, and it would be something you'd have to respond to if and when.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Another question I have for Scott regarding zoning. We talked about parking here, and one of the things I appreciate about the Denver zoning code, and this was true in the previous zoning code as well, is that for historic buildings, both listed historic buildings like landmarked, as well as buildings over a certain age, in many cities, the parking requirements for uses are such that when a use changes, those historic buildings built before cars can't meet them. And so the buildings become kind of unusable because they can't meet the parking requirements. Denver, for these historic buildings, says, no, whatever parking you have is deemed sufficient. So I would imagine for the main property here, whatever the uses zoning allowed, the parking would be sufficient. It's really the annex, both its current and future replacement annex, that would need to be parked. And the question is how much, and in the PUD memorializes that the amount they have is sufficient, that 9 spaces we've heard about. So do I have that right? And is it true that a way of thinking about it is that's really about the annex because the house was already sufficient for whatever use there might be?
Yes, that's basically correct. Parking requirements for historic structures, older structures, are whatever they currently have, they can maintain. And then it was the new structure that would need to be parked at whatever the appropriate parking is based on the use. And so the intent of the PUD is to basically say for the entire property, whatever they have currently just needs to be maintained, which is that 9 spaces. So that's why it's defined that way in the PUD.
Okay. Well, I'm looking for hands of other questions from board members. I'll give it just a moment. And seeing none, we will close the public hearing. I'll ask staff, now that we're out of the public hearing, to turn off the chat so that because that was for tech support when we're calling on folks to speak. And we'll turn to deliberations from the board, starting with Ignacio.
Thank you. I really did not have any questions. I was impressed, though, by the number of opposing comments to this rezoning, and I can understand that, and I sympathize with that. but philosophically, I do not align with any of those comments. Questions that Don asked made it clear that the way we're using that parcel today is not going to be much different. Actually, if anything, the uses are going to be more restricted in the future. The arguments about parking offend me in a way, because I think that we are at a point in the history of Denver that we are beyond the car-oriented mentality, and especially these neighborhoods that are more mature and more settled and have a much greater history and experience on mobility, not just based on the automobile. So I am going to support this application for recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. Looking for additional hands up for deliberation. Gosha.
Yes, thank you. I will also support it. I found Gordon's comments about park edges interesting. The way I think about it is a mix of uses. I think that some light commercial uses mix well with recreational uses that are complementary in a way. Parks get used more if there's a place to stop by for refreshment or restroom. So I believe that adjacency is appropriate and in line with our city plans. I also think there's a benefit of public health, the walkability aspect. People like to walk to places that have destinations, even if it's just a coffee shop or small retail. So I believe that that enhances that aspect of our plans in the context of public health and walkability. So I believe that application is consistent with our adopted plans, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. In the queue, I have Heidi and then Dawn.
Thank you. I wanted to thank everybody who commented tonight, those who were in favor and who were opposed, for their civility. This was obviously a very controversial matter, and I felt like everybody delivered their comments quite professionally, and we really appreciate that. We don't always see that level of self-regulation, so thank you. I will support this. I struggled with the parking. I spent some time over the weekend on the site, probably parked illegally for a few minutes, looking at it to see how some of the parking concerns could be resolved. And you know, generally with sites like this, you see that there is some level of self-regulation by folks who want to have events there, that they recognize that if they're going to have a big event, they need to figure out how to get there using public transit or bikes or walking. And if they don't have a lot of parking and they need to accommodate that, they'll go elsewhere. So I'm going to trust in that belief. And wanted to say I appreciate the good neighbor agreement, even though it's not technically part of our criteria. The only other thing I wanted to address was the speaker Mary's comment about affordable housing. We do raise it a lot. I raise it a lot. It's something that I'm very passionate about, but I just want to clarify that we're not ruling on use, and we don't have the authority to recommend an alternative use. We're ruling on the recommendations, meeting the criteria, which are here on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dawn and then Aaron.
So Heidi made two of the points I was going to make, so I don't have to make them except to amplify. I appreciate the civility, appreciate the long amount of time that has been gone on it, and even the applicants requesting a delay for the sake of getting the good neighbor agreement adopted. I think in case of PUD, it is relevant because it's relevant to the additional criteria that we look at for PUD, which basically talk more intensely about things like compatibility with adjacent uses. And so unlike most places where I don't think it really is part of our criteria, when you do a PUD, I think it kind of is. So and I'm particularly appreciative of those speakers who have engaged in good faith with the Good Neighbor Agreement and now have withdrawn their opposition. I think it takes some class to agree that, notwithstanding the fact you didn't get everything you wanted, you honor the fact that you have reached an agreement and you want that on the record. So I very much appreciate that. I do want to talk a little bit about the standards, the criteria. Uniformity, I have a really hard time with in pleas and waivers and objections. Anytime you draft a one-off zone district, it's going to be uniform with itself. It doesn't really mean anything, but staff struggles with how to explain that. Inherent in a PUD is your agreement to adopt something which is a one-off, which is sort of inconsistent with the uniformity requirements. Public health, safety, and welfare. I try to take this seriously. My colleagues know. And this is the criteria. This is how I interpret, not the implementation of plans, but I think it meets public health and safety and welfare, meaning it passes that test if there are no circumstances unique to the site, not anticipated at the time the city's plans were made, that create significant risks to public health or safety that can't be evaluated and mitigated at the time of a development plan. You know, it's a close question here. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of cars on 13th Street, 13th Avenue, and it's not an open shot case. Again, we got people, parking, deliveries, one-way street of high volume. And yet I notice in the Good Neighbor Agreement, they have agreed to a park and safety consultant, and to make that a part of this, I think there's kind of nothing more you can do than that. It's a constrained historic parcel. It's already constrained. And to the degree that you're going to change the use, the best you can do for public health and safety is to say, we'll take the advice of professionals as to what we need to do to make the best of this situation. So last, I'm only going to talk about the special PUD requirements, the criteria that apply when we do a PUD. I am not a fan of PUDs. I have voted against some in the past that I, upon reflection, had thoughts about my opposition. I think we should be very limited. However, it's very clear that one of the driving forces is preservation of a historic building, and that is clearly met here. There are two other parts of the criteria that I struggled with a little bit. This quote, a PUD district is not intended as either a vehicle to develop a site inconsistent with the applicable neighborhood context and character, or solely as a vehicle to enhance a proposed development's economic feasibility. We saw some letters saying, hey, why bail out CHUN financially? This is all about bailing out CHUN, or this is all about creating an investment opportunity for city street investors. I think that's what's going on here. And I think we have to look through there and say, you know, you don't ask for PUD just because you can make more money. This is truly a constrained site in which there is a money-making activity being requested for the sake of historic preservation and community gathering place. I think it passes that muster, despite the opposition saying, hey, it's all about the money, isn't it? And finally, land use is compatible with the adjacent properties. Well, adjacent properties are the townhouses, and it's not the whole thing. It's the adjacent properties, the park, and One Cheeseman Place, One Cheeseman Place. This is a limited commercial use next to residential uses, but again, it's been there. CHUN has been holding events on this for a long time. And the real question is this much different than what's going on now? The opponents think it is. I think it's not that much. So do passes that compatibility test, even when we stare at it and say, wow, commercial and community gathering place in the middle of a residential and next to a park. I think agree the testimony or the comments made by Mrs. Goldhaber that actually this enhances the safety and usability of the park. I run in the park and I have rented the space. And when I run in the park, I like to look at what's going on in the space. And when I'm in the space, I like to look at the runners in the park. I don't actually think those are incompatible uses. I think they're, so I'm going to decide that in light of that, and in light of the language and the staff have gotten, it also applies with the applicable plans, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Erin.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I've really been focusing on the idea of compatibility, and especially as that is defined by those in the area. I want to honor the large number of letters that we got in opposition to this, because I'm keenly aware that kind of what we have today, this is a unique situation in that the large RNO is also the applicant here and has been able to organize a lot of folks to write in support, and also to be, and we're well represented in the public comments we have here today. But that being said, we did, the Good Neighbor Agreement just came today, and so I really tried to look at that also in light of what were those comments that we got, what were the comments in opposition, and does that Good Neighbor Agreement really help address those things? And what I saw a lot was kind of compatibility of a commercial use there, talking about parking and hours of operation. And those are the things that are addressed in the Good Neighbor Agreement. And as we illuminated earlier in the conversation, this is not a residential use currently, and events are permitted currently. And I think that the discussion about kind of what is compatible with a park is also relevant here, in terms of there is a difference between what's happening directly inside of the park and what is happening on the edge of the park. And I think it's important that we maintain that distinction, and that I think this is compatible on the edge of the park and is actually complementary in many ways. So yeah, I agree with what my colleagues said. I just wanted to add that little bit, and I will be supporting this as well.
Thank you. Heidi, your hand is up. Is that from before? Okay.
I'm sorry, Joel. Someday I'll get that right.
No, it's all right. Okay, I'll make just a few comments. I want to thank everyone who wrote in, everyone who stayed on for hours participating and watching. I really appreciate the robust community dialogue. I think it was robust because this is a unique site. It has been unique. It's been different than the properties around it for a long time. But in what way, to what extent, with what limits, and what happens with the constraints like parking that pre-exist in light of evolving uses. Not surprised at all that there's a lot of dialogue around this. I do appreciate the outreach, turning to agreement. That's not one of our criteria, but it is very good to see. I know it didn't satisfy everybody. I have my own questions about it in terms of being a perpetual restriction, because unlike zoning, which can change over time with public process, it's not clear to me how a perpetual agreement that gets recorded against the property ever gets changed, especially as some of the signatories come and go. But that is outside of our purview. I just want to take the opportunity to express my concern about that whenever possible. So turning to the criteria, consistency with adopted plans, I believe, was met sufficiently. Our plans do allow for a small mix of uses in residential areas, and this has always been, well, not always, this has been, as long as I've been aware of it, a place that has some special uses in it that's allowed by zoning, and so too will this proposal. Don spoke well about the awkwardness of the uniformity criteria when you're doing custom zoning, which gives me an opportunity to talk about it does meet, I believe, the criteria for use of custom zoning. Given the competing needs and desires and the unique use of the property and the unique use of the property proposed, there isn't a zone district that would be more appropriate. And to do the lower level of customization, waivers and conditions, rather than a full custom zoning, would be essentially to do a full custom zoning with a large list of waivers and conditions. So I think a PUD is the right tool in this case. Will it further the health, safety, and general welfare? Well, the question is, by implementing our plans it does that. But is there any concern that it's going to hurt health, safety, and welfare? And this is my opportunity to say how much I appreciate the parks advocates. I met with some of them years ago as we were starting a committee in INC, and was introduced to the folks, some of whom testified today, who started the Friends and Neighbors of Cheeseman Park group years ago when the park was very troubled. And through their efforts and partnership with the city, it's a fantastic park. It's a safe place to be. And it is that place where you can go have a picnic comfortably, no matter who you are. You can walk, you can bike, and you can be. And so I understand the defensiveness about anything that might change. At the same time, when I think about perfectly reasonable things people do in this park and others, quiet parks, not parks that are kind of recreation fields, but quiet parks for private recreation, individual recreation, one of those things is picnics and active edges, someplace to come and go and get that whatever, get that ice cream, get that soda as you're throwing the Frisbee or having a picnic, seems to make sense. I've struggled with parks in my neighborhood that don't have active edges. And I think it's a stabilizing feature, but I appreciate and value the posture and the defensiveness, the protection that some of the people who remain opposed have for this reason. From a zoning criteria and with the input from Parks and Rec about are there any parks goals or regulations that are adopted that would be challenged here, I don't see a problem with health, safety, and general welfare. The other through criteria have already been spoken to sufficiently, so I will be happy to support this. Any other deliberation from the board? Would someone like to make a motion? Ignacio? I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
All right.
I move to recommend that City Council approve application number 2018I-00142, rezoning 1290 Williams Street from GMU 20 UO-3 to PUD-G 23, finding that the applicable review criteria have been met. I believe with the following condition: that no retail food from food trucks be allowed.
Second.
Okay, who is the second?
That was me, Andrew.
Andrew. Okay, it's been moved by Ignacio and seconded by Andrew. Question for Annalise. Did that expression of the requested condition meet the expected text? We don't have that on the screen.
I believe so. I was trying to listen closely and follow, but I believe so.
Okay, so we'll be eliminating that one use with the essentially the restaurant use that's mobile specifically.
May I make a friendly amendment to just say that it is specifically retail food establishment mobile that would be removed?
All right, Ignacio, are you all right with that?
How is that different from retail food from food trucks?
It's just the name specifically that the zoning code refers to that use.
Okay, go ahead. What is the name again?
It's the defined term in the code, which is retail food establishment mobile.
Are you all right to modify your motion?
Yeah. I am. I was just writing. I reinstate the motion. I move to recommend that City Council approve application number 2018I-00142, rezoning 1290 William Street from GMU 20 UO-3 to PUD-G 23, finding that the applicable review criteria have been met with the following condition: that no retail food establishment mobile be allowed.
Second.
Okay, the mover and seconder agreed to that restated motion. Discussion on the motion. Okay, seeing none, I will do a roll call vote. Andrew?
Aye.
Angel?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Gosha?
Aye.
Heidi?
Aye.
Ignacio?
Aye.
I will vote aye as well. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.